Parity is a long-term investment in consumer confidence that when they search for something, they should buy it. Especially if you run an attraction that has a lot of repeat visits. If the first time they buy, they see different prices all over the place, that's going to shift their confidence in making any given buying decision in the future. And you're going to have to spend more marketing dollars. This is about honing consumer confidence. The dollars will go to the place that deliver the people who convert the highest. And if that's the LLM, then that's the LLM. But it reinforces the need to have tremendous hygiene between distribution points because the LLM will find the inefficiencies. How do you identify the consumer behavior you wish to see? And then how do you build pricing strategies to try and drive that behavior? And then how do you measure how successful you are doing?
You're listening to Signal,
the podcast for attraction leaders shaping the future of guest experiences. This is Signal.
Today, we're joined by Evan Reece, an entrepreneur whose career has been defined by one big idea. Pricing isn't just about numbers, it's about shaping behavior. Evan is best known for pioneering real-time pricing strategies in industries like ski resorts. You might have heard of Liftopia or Catalate, where he showed operators how to balance demand, value perception, and guest satisfaction. But what makes Evan's perspective so valuable for attractions is that he's not just a pricing guy. He's a behavior strategist. He spent years helping organizations rethink the way they set prices, not to punish demand, but to create the patterns they want to see in guest behavior. And here's what's interesting. He doesn't start with fancy algorithms. He starts with what he calls pricing hygiene, the unsexy but critical work of making sure your prices are consistent across every channel where your tickets are sold. Because the truth is, you can have the most sophisticated dynamic pricing on your website, but if you have 150 other websites selling your tickets at different prices, you're undermining your entire strategy. Today, Evan runs his own advisory practice and is also building new technology ventures aimed at shifting consumer behavior in other industries. For our audience, his insights come at a perfect moment. Attractions everywhere are rethinking their 2026 pricing models right now. Evan, welcome to Signal.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
What we typically do here as we get started is we break it into parts. I'm going to start with what's part one, which is calling pricing hygiene comes first. And I'm just going to kick off the first question and then we're just going to go back and forth. And I can guarantee you that what's going to happen is we're going to end off on some sort of like rabbit trail.
Perfect.
Asking about all these different things because we're legitimately interested. This is the good thing about being podcasters now, because we're now professional podcasters, is that
don't throw the P word around. We're just podcasters. I don't think we're professional yet.
Semi-pro.
Yeah, we're professional because we get paid to do this, but it's not that there's anyone watching it.
Oh, we do?
We do. Yeah,
we're getting paid for this? No.
Last I checked, yeah. Depending on how well it does, we'll see if that continues. Okay. All right, Evan, You've said pricing hygiene matters more than dynamic pricing itself. What does bad hygiene look like in practice for an attraction operator?
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, it's funny because I spent so much time trying to convince people to like be more scientific with their pricing strategies, dynamic pricing being one of them, and how, as I stepped into my advisory work, how I'm really going back to basics and sort of saying like, for folks even who are doing dynamic pricing, like, hey, let's take a step back from dynamic pricing and think about your overall approach. And you sort of hinted at this in the intro, but I think that a lot of people sort of forget about consumer behavior when they're building pricing strategies.
Yeah.
And in the end, this is all about consumer behavior. I mean, the vast majority of people have never purchased something on their own website before. And even though they have shopping behaviors of their own when they're stuff for travel or whatever, they sort of forget that other people are like that in the same way. So to me, bad pricing hygiene is when you have a really thoughtful pricing strategy approach on your direct site, but you also have a bunch of other things in the market that might undermine that approach. And it could be legacy agreement that you have in place that gives someone, and by the way, some of these distribution points, that's the way they operate still.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a price point out in the market that is lower than the price point and people can buy direct, the market's going to find out about it. And it's it's sometimes pricing alone, like, hey, I'm taking a look to buy a ticket into November 17th. What's the price right now? But it's also customer service policies. It's how the marketing messaging sort of supports that. It's also, if you are doing dynamic pricing, sort of what flavor of dynamic pricing are you doing? Are you following a strategy where it starts low and goes high, or are you dropping last minute and angering customers who bought already? And I think like the broader way I think about this is like, how do you build organizational alignment around pricing strategies such that everybody's rowing in the same direction? So, and literally my first client when I started doing
I was just going to ask you about this because I remember the conversation from Arrival.
yeah,
It was
it was
you
amazing.
spent 8 minutes and you found all these things undercutting your own site.
Exactly. And they are incredibly bright people with a amazing attraction in, a world-class city. And I was brought in to help them think through their pricing science and how to become more scientific with it. And literally just in the research phase of maybe signing up with them, I went to their website, I searched for a ticket for some date in the future. And then I Googled them and went to a few other sites, did the same search and found lower prices on literally the first 5 websites that I checked. And
Oops.
yeah, in that case, it's funny because like being the dynamic pricing guy or having been that historically, my first bit of guidance was, hey, you need to stop your dynamic pricing. Because the way that
Just
it's
don't
happening,
do it.
yeah, and the way that it's propagating out and the lack of hygiene and control that they had over, prices and real-time availability of prices in other channels meant that they're undermining themselves. Where we started was just to sort of get that under control. So take a step back from being truly dynamic and then observe shift in pattern after they knew that for a certain period of time, everything in the future was going to be the same price on distribution points as it was on the direct site. They said they shifted direct bookings from 45% to 55%, like pretty much immediately. And so it's not to say that dynamic pricing and more sophisticated pricing methodologies aren't tremendously impactful. But if you're undermining yourself and you don't have those bases covered, then it's sort of like it's better to walk before you run.
Okay, so I mean that it's fascinating because I mean it just proves that there's a science to it, right? There's this it's not just a one size fits all. But I have a question. We're on the first question, and I'm immediately going to go off stream. Here we go, Evan. Like, how did you end up here? Like, how did you end up being the pricing wizard that you are? Like, how did this happen? Like, did you wake up when you were 5 and go, you know what I want to be? I want to do dynamic pricing.
Absolutely not. I had like zero perspective. So, I mean, my career journey was sort of interesting and I'm pretty long-winded, so you'll probably cut most of this out.
You're not nearly as long-winded.
No, we don't. No.
Yeah. So I got a liberal arts degree and I graduated in 2001. And I was an international studies / German studies major. So like I had a liberal arts degree inside of a liberal arts college. I was exposed to a lot of different things, but had like zero things that I was actually good at. It's like, I guess I'm half decent at learning new things like that. So I had a very thin understanding of a bunch of stuff. And I decided to move to California because my older brother was there and I had a free couch to sleep on. And I was halfway across country when September 11th happened. And so I arrived in San Francisco with a liberal arts degree 6 days after September 11th with no job, luckily a couch. And then I did a bunch of temp work, which was hilarious. There's a bunch of funny stories in there. The nice thing about temp work, though, even if you're doing the most menial task at any given company, is that you're getting exposure to a lot of different things. And it's for someone who had zero context for what like work really was. It was kind of good to take a look. It's like 2-week stint at JCPenney printing from microfiche so they could look at old data. And then a few weeks doing customer service for Zappos before they were good at customer service. And it's actually funny because it's in that book. But anyways, I ended up getting a job at Hotwire, which is a travel company owned by Expedia. And
for the youngins in the group,
it's for the youngins in the group. Yeah. And
how you actually purchase stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With our dial-up modems and
exactly.
No.
But what was hilarious is one of my brother's friends from college was there, but they had realized they were spending so much on temp workers that they'd be better off if they just hired an internal temp. And so I was hired as a floater. Like I would go do 3 weeks with marketing, and then I'd do 2 weeks with customer service, and then 4 weeks with finance. And
that's a heck of an education.
totally. I mean, and again, it was always the most menial stuff. But as someone who was like curious, but really didn't know what he wanted to do, it was great exposure. If you look at the people at Hotwire, were incredible. I mean, they were super bright, but also fun. They like took work seriously, but not themselves seriously. And I ended up moving into the hotel department at Hotwire, and started just in sort of customer support, and then worked into sort of account management, and then later sales. And one of the things that was incredible about them is they did an amazing job at logging consumer intent data adjacent to pricing and revenue for hotels. That it was really easy to observe and find pricing opportunities for hotels that would dramatically increase their performance. So as a market manager, I could call, Tim and be like, hey, it looks like your price is slightly out of the band of consideration. And if you just drop your price for the 14th by $3, you'll see a dramatic increase in your booking volume. And it worked. And so that sort of introduced me to what I think of as like relative metrics. And the hotel world and the e-commerce world is full of relative metrics. You have, at the property level, you have things like RevPAR, which allow people to think about occupancy and a rate at the same time through the lens of future opportunity at the property for any given date. And it allows you then to compare different hotels with one another, and then different markets with one another. It's how the industry maps trends. And then on the e-commerce side, there's the like marketplace relative metrics, which is conversion rate. So what percent of people who come to the store actually buy something. But then there was this intent data that was deeper, which is, they log an instance of someone looking into Las Vegas for January 5th on November 1st. They log all of those, and then you see performance. All the OTAs have this metric called a book to look ratio. So it's like bookings over instances of willingness to book. And there's the global metric, but there's also the like date specific metric. And that was where we were finding all the opportunity to use price to shift consumer behavior. So anyways, I became kind of obsessed with just how powerful it was.
Yeah.
Because it worked. And then I was lucky enough that they flew me up to take some more formal revenue management training courses at the Expedia office in Seattle. And then I just ended up liking it. And again, I didn't like recognize at the time that it was something that I was into. It just was cool to look at data, make suggestions, and see shifts in consumption patterns. Then the founding story of Liftopia kind of came out of that. I was managing some ski markets on behalf of the hotel team there. And my co-founder and I were looking at those markets. And at some point there was a discussion around, oh man, they should sell lift tickets with these hotel rooms. Turns out no one was doing that. And what we later discovered is that no one had sold a lift ticket on the internet before, which was kind of crazy. This was 2005. What's insane is that like the benefit of pre-sale with hotels and air is they get some predictability of revenue, but the behavior was always there. Like people bought hotel rooms before the internet. And part of the reason was that hotels might sell out, but with ski lift tickets, there's never a sold out sign at a ski resort. And so we were like, well, in order to shift this behavior, we would have to give consumers a reason to shift that behavior. And that was pricing. And so Liftopia started as this idea of being like a marketplace for ski lift tickets that sits on top of a foundation of pricing strategy.
It's so interesting. Attractions. I mean, I think I wrote my first, I want to say that around 2005 is when I wrote my first ticketing system.
Yeah.
And that was the first one that was an online ticketing system.
Yeah.
And everything before that point in attraction and tours was really, you call in.
Yeah.
Or buy at the window, right? Like that was how it worked. And I remember back, around that time writing that first system and it being like this, we were giving coupons out on that website.
Totally.
Of $5 off, $10 off, just so you'd buy online.
Totally.
Weird, right? Like, and just to try and incentivize to try and get people to.
Yeah, I mean that's dynamic pricing with consumer behavior. Yep. And I imagine ahead of building that, you also saw what we saw in the ski industry, which was like other discounts that existed in the marketplace that really weren't beneficial to the supplier.
Yeah, of course.
There's a thing where if you filled up your gas tank at certain gas stations in certain cities, you'd get 2-for-1 lift tickets to ski areas.
Right.
Well, everybody needs to drive to ski areas and everybody needs gas. So all you're doing is subsidizing people getting more gas, or which station to buy the gas at, like whatever.
There's lots of examples of that.
You saw it early too,
Yeah.
but even today, it depends on the attraction, the location, and the specific business. But there are many businesses that could and should be 100% online, and they're not.
And they're not.
And sometimes that is tied to this organizational commitment to this holistic approach. But
Agreed.
also tied.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thanks for answering the off the trail question there. It's nice to get a little context.
Well, it's a really long answer.
Yeah. And now I'll hand it back to you, Tim.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go off our questions, since we're already off them anyways, and we seem to be covering everything. So Jerry's our producer. Jerry, don't kill us. So on that note, Evan, we've talked quite a bit about price parity in general, specifically with, you have these other OTAs or discount sites like Groupon, and we haven't gotten into like pricing strategy, like the different, like, flat, tiered, dynamic, fully dynamic, all of those different things. But just in general, most attractions will have some mix of pricing. Like, it's usually not all one type or the other. But you do have systems out there like Groupon, Booking.com, different things that can't ingest dynamic pricing or certain types of pricing. So we talked a little bit about parity, and I think it'd be great if you could explain in your words what pricing parity is across there, and really how to approach it from an attraction or tour to make sure that everything's in line.
Yeah, I mean, parity is an interesting concept because most people are familiar with it in the hotel space. It's like, hey, Expedia has the same price on any given hotel room as the hotel site and any other site. And that wasn't always true. And that's why Kayak exists, is like disparity was a function of lack of consumer confidence because there were different prices all over the place. And then Kayak showed up and honed that consumer confidence into marketing dollars spent in their channel. But in any case, I think about parity not through the lens of just like the price is the same, but it's like price for commitment from the user with like restrictions applied to the user. So like you could have, a ticket that's $40 for the 17th. That's non-refundable. Or you could have a ticket for $40 that's usable any day. And that's out of parity, even though the price is the same. Because the restrictions on the ticket are different in those two cases. And so I think about if the channel sells in the same way as the mechanisms that I'm selling on my site, then for any given search, the price should be the same. Frankly, the customer service policy should be the same. So like, can I refund it? Can I move to a different date? All that sort of stuff. But it's not to say that those channels that sort of sell in a bit of a non-traditional way can't have an impact that is positive, even if the price is different. Hotwire, which is where I got my career started, that was a lower price than if you bought direct. You bought a hotel and you got a lower price than if you bought direct, but you didn't know which hotel it was before you bought. So you're buying a 4-star hotel, and it might be any of these 4 properties, and it's non-refundable, and you can't change dates, and you can't change who's checking in and all that stuff. Sometimes marketplaces are reaching different consumers, but sometimes about different commitments. And so with something like Groupon, Tim, you probably remember, we used to say, hey, look, it's not that like Groupon can be a great channel. What do you have for sale there? Is it a 4-pack? That like, instead of just having a ticket that can be used whenever, you could sell something that is a strategic upsell, which is a different type of commitment in exchange for a different incentive that you're providing the user, which is typically price.
Yeah, I mean, those channels like Groupon are great from an operator perspective when you're trying to reach a different market, or you have a different entry product within that space. Yeah, I remember we did some restrictive, I think it was Halloween stuff. Like no one came on a Friday, so we would put Friday night tickets, on Groupon just to drive that, and it was successful because it drove the revenue within the park. So I think it's about finding that right mix. But on pricing parity, you got 40 here, you got 40 here. Consumers shop by price. So how do you get them to consider the restrictions on the ticket? Or
they also
not matter.
They also shop by restriction. Like they are, I mean, think of yourself buying a hotel room. Like you go and you look for a price and you see what's included. And then you go around and you look at other places and see what's included. But by the way, I'm going to steer away slightly now just because, but
You're like, I'm over this. We're moving
No,
on.
no. But steering back to Groupon and marketplaces in general and third-party distribution. And it's funny because my experience, I ran a marketplace, which was Liftopia.com, and I ran a res tech that gave direct sellers the same exact tools as we had on Liftopia.com. So I have a pretty unique sort of like understanding of the tension between third-party distribution and direct sales. But I think there is a large sort of like sometimes deserved, sometimes not negative perspective of third-party distribution in this space. Whereas like, dang, I have to be selling through insert marketplace here. I don't want to call out any given brand name. But it actually comes back to the parity question, which is like, if you are in control of your pricing and you have hygiene around it, and the price point isn't undermining your site because it's at parity, then you're sort of rowing in the same direction as your distribution points. And then you are leveraging their audiences. And in theory, like the math of it all is, if you're doing this perfectly, a lot of people think of like a third party piece of distribution as costing the commission and like a direct sales being free, but it's not true. It's like, it's just where the dollars are spent. With third party distribution, you're spending in margin. The direct sale, you're spending in marketing. And so if you're doing this super well, then the cost of the transaction as measured by commissions through third party should more or less match the cost of driving a specific transaction through your direct site as measured by spend on Google or Facebook or whatever. And if you're in control of your parity, then you are actually in a good spot to leverage marketplaces in a fair way to both sides. That's how
I agree with you that they get a bad rap, and I think it's about optics and the way that operators think about it.
Yeah.
So you're using these OTAs or third party sites, and it feels like their hands in your pocket because you think of your expenses like around marketing, customer acquisition cost, all of those things as just things you need to do to have the business, right? So you don't correlate those directly across from each other. And I think that's something that as operators, you can look a little more diligently at and use the channels that are right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're going to use the channel, figure out how to use it such that the vast majority of the time it's rowing in the same direction as your internal efforts. And the other thing that you go back to parity, and it's a bummer because parity is a long-term investment in consumer confidence that when they search for something, they should buy it. If they search, especially if you run an attraction that has a lot of repeat visits, if the first time they buy, they see different prices all over the place, or they see you drop price last minute, that's going to shift their confidence in making any given buying decision in the future. And you're going to have to spend more marketing dollars on. Anytime someone says, when the question is like, should I buy right now? When it's yes, like your conversion rates are high, your return on marketing spend is high. When it's, then you're spending more dollars to create that transaction. Anyways, like the thing is like, is any given decision I'm making with regards to pricing and distribution undermining consumer confidence that they should buy right now? And if so, then maybe shift.
So along the same line, like hotels have been doing this kind of stuff for years. I mean, it's so that only recently did I start deciding to call direct back to hotels and say, okay, actually, can you get a better price from you? And the answer is, generally speaking, not really. Sort of, not really. If you're standing right at the desk, we did this just a couple weeks ago. We were dropping our kids off and they gave us a price that was a little bit less. Yeah. But then there's points that you get on some of these services like hotels. And so we decided to buy it right there in front of them on the points.
Yep.
And then they comped us an upgrade, which was their way of kind of approaching that. But I'm like, so this has been sorted out in hotels for a long time. Everyone's comfortable with it. Hotels are comfortable with it. Consumers are comfortable with it. What are the structural differences that make this harder in attractions? I have my own theories, which I'm more than happy to go into, but it's not really me that needs to answer the question.
Well, no, but I like the theories because as you've heard, I can drone on and on. I think one of the hard parts, and I'll stop after this so that you can give me some of your theories, is like the hotels, unless you're staying at an aspirational property, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of just where you're sleeping. It's not why you're taking the trip. It's not why you're making the buying decision.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a necessary requirement to the trip that you've decided to make.
It has to be good enough.
It has to be good enough. And you might spend on special occasion type stuff or special level service.
Yeah.
But most attractions are kind of like, if they're destination attractions, they're like if I'm in Paris, I might do some stuff, but it's not why I'm going to Paris. Sorry, like there are certain things that I would do in Paris that I'm excited about because it is the thing, like the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre or
Eiffel Tower,
whatever. Yeah. For a local attraction, it's the only buying decision. It's like the way you access the thing that you're deciding to do.
Yeah.
Which is a little unlike the hotel.
There's a lot of different ways that you can sell third party and using kind of cross channel kind of things. There's a lot. There's the small operator, local OTA kind of idea. There's just so many different opportunities out there. It's been interesting to me to watch. We actually did a publication about 4 years ago, maybe it's almost 5 years ago, that we called OTA responsibly, which was, if you have a gap, we're generally filling 80% of our seats and the last 20% of our seats are kind of open.
Yeah.
Go and fill those.
Yeah.
And go ahead and use an OTA to do that. And we had one customer that made 30% more that year because they went and did that. Totally. And it just really changed the outlook for them as a company. And it's really fascinating watching those kind of things. But then as I step back and I look at it, I go, a lot of these OTAs, especially the really big ones, are these unicorn status, these giant companies that are taking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. And then they come and they dictate terms. Sometimes they take your marketing and they do a lot of things to drive their revenue forward. And I go, that makes it so much harder for the operator who's maybe a $5 million operator or maybe a $10 million rev operator to really feel like they're playing on a field that is going to meet their needs. And then they're paying 30% for the privilege. And I agree with you, that 30%, I used to listen to Chris, the former CEO of Resd, talk about this. He's like, these are marketing dollars you're spending. You're not like, this isn't a big deal. This is marketing dollars. But it's really hard to stomach that giant company over there making so much money off the back of what you think is yours.
The good news, which takes us back to the hygiene stuff, is like they've become friendlier and the capabilities have gotten better. And by the way, they are tremendous at driving consumer behavior because their UX is incredible.
Yeah.
They do have their own relative loyalty. I remember they're growing here now, but like the Get Your Guide guys have done an amazing job. And I've really got Get Your Guide the last time I was in Europe, where I was in Amsterdam with my wife. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I could do like my whole visit on Get Your Guide, especially if you're a small operator who doesn't have tremendous brand strength, or your product is somewhat fungible, meaning like there are other people who provide a similar service. And even if you're special, like through the eyes of the consumers, like you kind of have to be in those marketplaces. But back to my first client, there were no like terms dictated by these marketplaces that they had to have lower prices in those marketplaces. They were just doing it to themselves. And it was partially because of some older school distribution points that are sort of pen paper trying to steal us for a year. But some, it was just like latency between pricing updates made on their own site and how they flow down through to their distribution points.
Well, I don't remember, I like to give credit where credit's due, but I don't remember who wrote the article, but there was a study done about how back in 2008, the financial crash of 2008, how OTAs were actually one of the big reasons that people went back out and started going to their local attractions. Totally. And people started traveling again, that they actually, the way that they did it actually rebooted the market again and brought attractions back in. And I think that's really fascinating because, I mean, it is an ecosystem that we live in, and it feels a little bit like there's just trust issues.
Yeah. And it's fair, like anybody who's run a marketplace business, and this is sort of what I'm encouraging people to understand about this hygiene stuff, is like every single marketplace, their relative success is entirely dependent on the quality of the inventory on their shelf. So the early marketplaces, they were smart. I don't think they were predatory. It was just like a function of like the internet was new and therefore some things were different. But like if you look at early hotel distribution on the internet, so you have hotels.com, you have Expedia, you have a bunch of other sites, Orbitz, Travelocity, whatever. And the like broad stroke approach from the OTAs at the time was, hey, hotel, here's the internet. There are a bunch of people who aren't comfortable using the internet or putting their credit card on the internet, but we have a customer set that is comfortable doing that. So you should give us some inventory at good prices such that you can tap into that audience. Actually, super rational, and they did. And it was akin to like prior to that, hotels would sell different inventory in places where there was more control around it. Like the example that I was given when I was at Hotwire was in the Chinese-speaking newspapers in San Francisco. The hotel would have special deals in that newspaper because unless you could read Chinese, like you couldn't get access to the deals. So it was a siloed, distribution strategy. And so when the OTAs first came out, that was rational. It made sense. But then you have the brands that said like, oh, well, this internet thing seems to be working. I'm going to sell on my own website too.
Yeah.
Totally rational. And then what our marketplaces said was, well, hey, hotel, your website, that's your most loyal customers. That's your premium guests. We have a bunch of customers who have they don't care brand. They don't know about your brand. They haven't decided where they're going yet. We should have a lower price here to like pull in some of this audience to draw them in because they're not you don't want to have it be on your website because then you're charging less to your premium customers. And that actually makes sense if Google doesn't exist, but Google does exist, or was becoming more popular. And then, so that argument made sense because it's like, here's a distinct audience in a distinct place, but all of a sudden there is no silo. Like the internet means everybody can find it. I mentioned Kayak before, but like Kayak emerged and they tapped into this lack of consumer confidence. And as the marketplaces got bigger, they looked a little bit more predatory as their rates were better than what the direct sellers were offering. Then Kayak shows up and Skyscanner and Site 59, or not Site. Anyways, doesn't matter. And they would take an unconfident buyer who's saying, should I buy right now? They'd form a search, they'd see a bunch of results, turn them into a confident buyer that this is actually the best price or is the best price. Even if it's these other ones, I know it's the best out there. And then they click off and they arrive confident, which means that the conversion rate on that traffic from Kayak was higher than what they could get out of Google because they had honed the intent down into dates and pricing confidence. And then they sold the price line for $1 billion, So anyways, then Parity emerged, but Kayak is still super relevant even in the age of Parity because there's so much latent distrust in any given price point on the internet that all of us are, shop around.
But we're coming to a weird kind of like singularity in pricing. So I don't know if you've been tracking this with Shopify, but Shopify and Perplexity signed a deal. And in that deal, what they did was they said, we're going to give you the inventory of every single store that we have from a product pricing perspective. And we're going to allow you to pull it into your LLM. And you're going to be able to search anything you want. And we're going to, and the store no longer matters, right? Like the store no longer matters. It's completely agnostic now. It's just whatever the best price is or whatever the best features are or whatever advantages you can have. That's coming. Like retail is about to do it and that's coming. What does that do?
I mean, well, I don't want to be one of the many people who claims to be an expert on AI. I would say,
come on.
The thing it doesn't change is that this is about honing consumer confidence. So like the dollars will go to the place that deliver the people who convert the highest. And if that's the LLM, then that's the LLM. But it reinforces the need to have tremendous hygiene between distribution points because the LLM will find the inefficiencies.
So then the really practical question then is, how as an industry do we prepare for that eventuality? Because if it happens in retail, we can guarantee that within the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to happen in our space.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about it is, does that mean there are no OTAs? Meaning like
yes.
Because if any given operator is confident that the LLM will find them as the only source of truth on the thing that they are selling, then they can be the only distribution point. Now,
I think that's a monetized equation though. Like, I think LLMs are looking for ways to pay the bills and keep the lights on. I think that's probably and they're going to have to do Google style money.
Without a doubt. Well, and if you think about like all the if natural search came first and paid search came second, and there's been some bleeding edge people who are taking advantage of natural search inside of LLMs, like guess what's coming next? Like paid search, I think the other thing it might not change is for the operators, attractions that, again, don't have truly distinct, differentiated experiences that they're offering. So like if you're one of 10 bike tour operators in wherever,
Yeah,
then
they're all functionally the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like the less differentiated you are, if there are numerous versions that look like you, then the probability is you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of distribution points because you're just trying to tap into demand for your commodity.
Well, and it's potentially a race to the bottom on price, right?
Without a doubt. And that definitely is a thing. The other end of the spectrum is Disney, like where the brand strength is so strong. There is not a fungible experience that someone can go to. Obviously, there are other like products that have their own, like Universal offers an amazing experience too, but Disney has tremendous brand strength. And then some things look like you'd think that globally they're not large, but locally they are strong brands. And actually ski areas are like that. Like they have, you may not know about Ragged Mountain in New Hampshire, but that is
Everybody
a large, yeah, well, there you go. That is a large local brand, that if you know about Ragged, then you know about Ragged, and it's not the same as having like a Holiday Inn across the street from a Vermata.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, there's opportunity to switch in between those metrics too. Like it's like the old Rolex problem, right? Like Rolex was every man's watch back in the early days of Rolex. Everyone had a Rolex.
Good point.
And now they are like, you buy a Rolex and wait 6 months to a year for a delivery because it's like buying a fancy car, right? Like,
and that is to race to the bottom point. It's like, the top of the market, you can differentiate. The bottom of the market, you can race to the bottom. The middle is always a little tough.
Right. Yeah.
So you talked about kind of interchangeable experiences where this is the same as something else that's in the market. But then I've seen these hyper saturated markets, Chicago, LA, New York, that have great variety of experiences, but they're all priced the same. Like everyone feels like there's some upper limit on what you can charge for a 45, 60, 90-minute experience. And then as soon as one person challenges that, everyone adjusts their price.
Totally. All right, now I'll go down to some like random granular dynamic pricing thing that is tied to my career start. There are a bunch of businesses that absolutely must pay attention to what their competitors are doing. Like, because if you don't, you're just going to get lost. And in the hotel world, there was a saying back when I was in it, where if you were like a 3-star hotel in a market that had, a handful of 3-star hotels, the saying was, from a pricing standpoint, you can only be as smart as your dumbest competitor because you kind of had to do what they were doing. What's interesting about your example, Tim, is like sometimes people get so caught up in that they fail to see any differentiation between themselves and what else might be purchased in the market. And there's a lot to be unlocked inside of that data that I mentioned at the front end that Hotwire did a lot with, and that Liftopia we did too, which is if you sit there and say, how should I price? Well, where is my competitor pricing? Then you're always going to price where your competitor is. But if you say, how should I price relative to my performance in the eyes of aggregate demand? Then you'll start to make tweaks based off of your true standing in the eyes of the consumer base, as opposed to just what your competitors are doing. Now, that requires gathering up that consumer intent data. And I imagine you all have some of that inside of your platform. I know at least Get Your Guide has some internal tooling on like indicating for operators relative demand volume into specific dates. But I really encourage people to look at that stuff when they have access to it.
I've always found pricing as an operator to be somewhat, I don't want to say a touchy subject, but it is a touchy subject. And it's a bit of a black hole that I think a lot of operators don't understand. And because of that, they undervalue their own experience. Because one, they're scared to isolate the consumer base, the customers that visit their attraction. Second, I think there's this internal phobia that I don't have all the information I need to make risky decisions with pricing, because it'll ultimately affect the outcome. How do you overcome that? Like I know how we overcame that with some orgs, but as an operator, say that there's an advocate that says we need to increase our price 50%, right? And we may do that over a couple of years, and everyone else in the org is saying we can never sustain that. Our guests will riot. They'll turn on us and move away. But in the world where there's data and there's intent data and you have competitor data and you look at the experience and say, our value proposition is this because we offer these other things compared to similar type experiences in the market. How do you get everyone on board? And how do you mitigate some of that risk when you're not sure?
One of the things that makes pricing so scary for people is that, historically speaking, you make a pricing decision once a year and you're stuck with it. And what that means is, like, you are literally like ruminating, place your bets.
Well, you printed your brochures and you put them in the hotel, right? Like that's it.
Or the signs, the physical signs.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You have to print tickets for the OTAs, like all of these things you used to have to
And
do.
you have your paper contracts and you have everything. And I think the fact that that was true, people still view we're going to decide our price as like a one time a year thing, or in the example that you provided, a like trajectory of like, what's the value of our experience? What is our price point? And by retaining that mentality that is tied to having to print the price on the brochure, you're really giving up a lot of control. And like, dynamic pricing, dynamic means you can change it, which implies a lot of control. Now, and this gets us to some of the, like, there's a variety of pricing philosophies out there. Broadly speaking, I think about how, and you mentioned this in the intro, like how do you identify the consumer behavior you wish to see? And then how do you build pricing strategies to try and drive that behavior? And then how do you measure how successful you are doing?
Evan, I think there's a lot of I think so many pricing decisions, even today, when we definitely are starting to head into a more data-centric thought process, like post-COVID, I'm seeing more and more focuses towards data is important. We need to think about the data and actually analyze it, start having our KPIs, understand our business, those kinds of things. But even now, I still see a lot of what I would consider to be fear-based pricing.
Definitely.
Which is, my competitor down the road is this price. Okay, and how does your competitor compare to you? Well, they actually don't. They're not a great attraction compared to us. We have all this other stuff, but we're still going to price exactly as they are because we're going to lose business otherwise. I've had experiences over the years of people being like, we can't go over $40. That's the hard limit. There's no way to do that. And then within a year and a half, we're selling for 75 and saw an increase in traffic, not a decrease, and effectively owned their region.
Yeah.
And but they had to take the plunge, right? And I know some operators are of the opinion that, like, listen, we're a one and done. Like, this is a bucket list item. You're never going to come back. We got to get this pricing right. And there's other operators that are very impacted by tour groups, where if you raise it at 25 cents, you're just not getting that tour group. They're going to go to somebody else. And there's like these kind of lock-ins. But by and large, I just see that fear is the thing that seems to control a lot of the pricing discussions and preconceived notions.
I just want to add to that a bit, like from the operator perspective, you think you have this upper tolerance on what your customers will allow you to do with pricing, right? And I think in some aspects you're undervaluing the value prop that they have. So you go through every year and you say, okay, well, our costs are increasing this because of inflation, cost of living adjustments, all these things. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to increase pricing 3%. And then you sit back in these groups that are the decision makers, stakeholders within these attractions, and you say, I think that's all that the market can maintain. Well, you've essentially never increased your price.
Yeah.
You've adjusted it for inflation, but you've never actually increased the price. And the more that we invest within these attractions, and the more that the value proposition increases, right? You're adding new rides, you're adding new tours, you're getting new boats, you're doing all these things that are enhancing the experience. You end up not adjusting for that.
Yeah. And I think, going back to the brochure thing and tying it to this, like, people think about product, price. And these days, it's not about product and price. It's product, price, commitment. What is the commitment that the user is making to get access to my product, and for what price? Like, if I were to say, like, well, what's the cost of a plane ticket? It depends. Depends on where you're going, when you buy. Like,
Who you want to fly with.
who you want to fly with. And I was having a discussion with a client today about hotel pricing strategy, and like how some people, the opposite problem can also occur, where people are like uncomfortable pricing lower because they feel like it'll chip away at their brand. And if you equate product and price, then I can see why. But if you look at like 5-star hotels in Vegas, there are certain days when they're $1,600 a night, and there are certain days when it's $120. And that's not a brand degradation thing. That's a pricing strategy thing. And we saw that you saw this a bit when we worked together, but like this fear of pushing price up as measured by product equals price and omitting the like commitment component prevents people from going up, but it also prevents people from going down. And I think that in most places, like there's a lot of danger in averages, and in pricing is tremendously so. So like you say, like, we're going to raise prices by 3% this year. What does that mean? Like, are you going to raise all prices 3%? Are you going to raise the window rate 3%? And there's a lot of granularity between like, okay, we're going to move our window rate from 40. And Tim, we talked about this when you were first a client. Hey, move your window, like just as a thought exercise. What happens if you move your window rate from 50 to 150? You say, well, if product equals price, then everybody gets pissed off. But if you say, it's not 150, it's 150 if you don't buy in advance. Check out our website. You can get tickets for $7. Like there are 8 remaining on the 15th. You should get them for $7. By the way, they're going to go up after that. And that is why needs to be this organizational commitment around like, 1, do we believe there's an opportunity to be more scientific with our pricing? 2, what's our philosophy? 3, what are the tools we're using to deploy it? 4, how are we going to measure it? And then all baked into this like hygiene that we started.
There's this, this is on topic, but slightly off topic in some sense. You remember 2 or 3 years ago, Disney they canceled all their memberships. Like they canceled all their passes. And then they doubled the price, and then they sold out in like minutes. And they came out with this crazy statement that said, we still have not found the upward bound of what people are willing to pay for our product. And I think most people that saw that just went, well, they're Disney. Doesn't apply to me. They're Disney. But I think there's a missed point there in that applies to us, very heavily applies to us. That most of us have no idea what the upward bound is, because our assumptions are wrong, or our stomach is too, we're too worried about what might be the ramifications.
And what the downstream or associated challenge with that is, if you're not confident in testing the upper bounds, then you're also not confident in testing lower bounds that might shift behavior that might benefit you similarly. And frankly, doing those together is the way that this all works well. Like in order to offer someone, tickets 6 months in advance for 73% off is by being able to have those prices graduate up in a controllable and knowable way, such that when you get last minute, you already have a massive base of business and your rate has moved up to $150 or whatever it is.
You're essentially, Evan, there's a lot of algorithms here. There's a lot of math. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of things like that. But in some senses, you're a behavioral scientist, right? Like, it's
like I don't write algorithms,
right?
Like I just think about how do we shift behavior, and then how do we give organizations confidence to make decisions that might do so. And that you don't need to have tremendous science. Like, you don't need to have the latest and greatest algorithm to test these methodologies in a way that will show very real results.
You don't need AI to do pricing well.
No.
Right? It can help, and it's a buzzword and everyone wants to talk about it, but you don't need AI to do pricing well.
Yeah, and if you try and use AI before you have a philosophy,
well, it's like anything you try to do with AI that you don't give it enough information.
Exactly.
It'll hallucinate.
What are the goals? I don't know. Here's my data.
Just to kind of build off this, we've talked about testing the upper and lower bounds and where you can go with price, and finding that based on my experience with working with different people and then experience throughout my career. I think the older an organization is, the harder it is for them to ingest dynamic pricing, do different things. And part of that is because of the risk associated with changing everything. So we've talked about pricing and how you price things, but we haven't talked about the coupons and the promotions and everything else that you put in the market that adjust pricing, right? So when we talk about hygiene and Parity, it's what the consumer is paying after all the discounts, promotions, and everything else, right?
Yeah, and I include the discounts in the hygiene argument.
Yeah.
Like if they're unfenced discounts, then anyone who knows that they can get it will get it instead of paying the other price.
And then the other thing that I've run into, just kind of as a talking point, I've had the opportunity to work with attractions that have multiple locations in different cities, different markets, the whole thing. And too many times they go in and say, this is our price. We have determined that this is our price for this experience, right? Or this is our pricing structure. Every market's different. Like I remember, there's one particular attraction that I'm thinking of that we're charging like $80 in one market and $30 in the other market for basically the same experience, right? Because that's the tolerance within those. Or another one of their markets, it was just driven by everyone wanted to feel like they were getting a better deal than everyone else, right?
Totally.
It's this, I'm getting a better deal than you are. So as long as there was a discount on it, it didn't matter what the upper threshold was.
Yeah, and there are inevitably some limits to both ends of this, right? Like a water park at $1,000 a day, like, and then you say, yeah, but it's 98% off. Like obviously that's a silly thing. But then
But
the
how
other
many
end,
people do you need at $1,000?
yeah,
Because people
exactly.
will
But
pay
then
it.
the other end of the spectrum is similarly ridiculous, which is like, hey, if you buy a ticket for January 17th, 2032 right now, you can get it for $3. And then all of this ramps based off of relative cost of thing, relative of ease of access to thing, relative aspiration of thing in the eyes of consumers, blah, blah, blah. But actually, this one thing came up as you were going down that path and also talking about AI. I think sometimes like doing more of something is not better. And I think there's a lot of danger in, a lot of people, if you read their sort of most likely AI driven LinkedIn engagement bait posts about dynamic pricing, they'll start talking about personalized pricing.
Yes.
Let's say like, oh, well, Tim has a different tolerance than John, and therefore like we should give him the price that's appropriate to him. I think that is such a terrible idea. And the reason I think it's a terrible idea is squarely tied to consumer confidence. So if I believe that someone out there might be getting a better price than me, then I'm not going to be confident saying yes to the question, should I buy right now? So I'm going to shop around more. So you're going to have to spend more on marketing dollars.
Yeah. So I'm going to dive in here because this is where I think we have two real markets where I look at and I go dynamic pricing. And if I was to just grab anyone off the street and say dynamic pricing, they're going to say one word, and that is airlines. And arguably, their amount of rage around airlines pricing, which is very personalized, quote unquote pricing, and also quite predatory in the way that the way it feels is very predatory, versus hotels and others that do dynamic pricing better. Like it's that perception component, and that is everything.
Yeah.
You don't know what the price is with an airline though. That's the missing piece. Like you don't know what the upper limit is. If you tell people what the upper limit is.
Yeah, and I do think that the other one that gets a lot of like that is in the minds of consumers when you mention dynamic pricing,
concert tickets,
concert tickets and Uber. And it was interesting about to rapid fire some things. Concert tickets, most of the revenue management and pricing occurs in the secondary markets because those products can be resold. And that where a lot of the gouging also occurs with Uber. When they launched surge pricing, unfortunately for all of us who had been in pricing forever on the like, how do we use incentive to drive behavior as opposed to how do we leverage behavior to make more money, look like jerks that were in pricing. And had they just branded it slightly different, like Uber's launching incentive pricing. So if you buy a ride 2 hours in advance, you'll get a better deal than if you wait. It's the same thing, but
plan ahead pricing.
Right? Yeah, and it's like what behavior do you want to encourage? In their case, it's different than airlines though, because when you need a ride, you need a ride. Like when you're shopping for an airline ticket, there's like some amount of, okay, I need to go on a flight, but it's later. And to Tim's point about him saying like there isn't a published rate, like here's the price of the flight if you don't buy before you go. People basically generally accept how airlines price right now, even if they hate it. But where airlines benefit is that their inventory is knowable and limited. So like people have seen instances where they didn't get on the flight that they wanted. And that's a driver of behavior in addition to the pricing strategy.
I want to go back at something that you said because I understand where your point was on it, and I differ slightly on it but I think the outcome is different.
Fight? No.
We might. John and I still need to fight. We said we were going to fight one time, and we never have yet. So we were talking, you mentioned personalized pricing. And I think with the context that you mentioned, it was, what is John's threshold to pay for this experience?
Yeah.
I think personalized pricing is kind of the next place where we're going with pricing, but not necessarily in that context.
Okay.
More in personalized packaging and then right sizing the price for that package.
Yes.
So there's a slightly different context around that, and data plays an important role in how do I service that to you, right?
Yeah.
Like, you gotta understand who you are, you gotta understand who you're coming with. Like, there's lots of different factors, but that in itself is incentive. Like, you can get all this stuff together for this price, and you're like, oh, that sounds reasonable. We'll do it. Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you're totally right, and I shouldn't have been so black and white on something that is pretty gray. Underlying point that I'm trying to make is people who try to use more science and pricing to like be sneaky with consumers to make more money off them
Get punished.
get punished. And sometimes, unfortunately, the LLM doing your shopping for you will be the first time that the travel industry recovers from the disparity that occurred in the year 2000. You know, like some of these patterns are so long and so enduring that they're generally accepted as truth, and it takes like some massive shift in tech to make that different. And I agree with you, Tim. Like if you know the customer, so you then provide them more value and an incentive to like buy that value, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's more about like, oh, how do I trick John into paying more than Tim?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're seeing the recourse of that with like these drip pricing laws that are coming all over the place. I've talked to a number of attractions that want to implement like credit card fees, percentage fees on the thing. I don't think that's a good approach, but however you want to do that, it's one of those things where I get really irritated when I go into a restaurant and there's a surcharge, right? Like just put in your price. Like I understand what it is, but then on the other hand, consumers go, well, I don't want to pay $25 for a hamburger.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll pay 17 and then I'll pay a $10 surcharge.
Yeah, except I mean, I look at this is kind of a funny thing, but McDonald's kiosks are like this weird little bellwether of things. First off, they probably have one of the best UIs I've ever seen for purchasing. Like, and it's like everyone else is playing catch up.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was looking at one the other day, and there was no combos on the front page, if I recall correctly. And I'm like, it's such a divergence from what we've done for years, which is I'll have combo 3. And yet there's this experience mentality of I want something that's unique to me. And now that's kind of gone into pricing. So it's like, we're going to do dynamic pricing or we're going to do personalized pricing. Well, that personalized pricing is because I want to have a hamburger. I don't want fries. I'm going to have a milkshake and I'm going to have some sort of like other item and make my own quote unquote package. And that seems to be what they're trying to do on those kiosks more and more, is to make that ability to add on and package yourself much, much easier and more fluid. And then there's opportunity for pricing.
I was going to say, like, your first point is what's most critical to know, which is their UX is amazing.
It's true.
There was a period of time when operators like, oh, well, the person's buying the ticket, but we also want them to buy these other things. And it was like, okay, well, let's do add-ons. Okay, like add this on, add that on, add that on, add that on. If you do that without amazing UX and your business has a ton of intent that doesn't convert and you're dependent on, 3 to 8% of your traffic converting, like you're torching the people who will definitively buy one thing, but definitely don't want anything else in the hopes that you turn some of them into the one person who buys everything together. And back to the Liftopia founding story, I guess I misspoke slightly. There were some lift tickets that had been sold on the internet before via Expedia in a hotel booking flow. After you get to the hotel, they say, we'd like to buy some lift tickets. And what Expedia saw is that the revenue increase associated with the lift tickets sold was more than offset by the decrease in conversion rate in the hotel booking flow because they were trying to get everybody to buy them. So like the incremental revenue torched the core business. And so they stopped selling lift tickets.
So this is one of the core beliefs we have right now is listen, tourism attractions, it's a wonderful space. I'm not at all calling down the tourism attraction space in the slightest, but we are generationally behind insofar as how purchases are made, how UX UI is done, how consumers operate in the wider space versus how they have to, or how they're forced to operate inside of a tourism attraction space. We're just behind.
Yeah. And the good news for many, but it yields bad news later, is like many of them have done just fine with subpar UX.
Yes, that's correct.
Because people want, like, they're not selling toothpaste, like these are things that people want to consume. But it's also one of the reasons that Get Your Guide, Viator, Head Out, like whomever, like converts so well, as their UX is amazing. And a lot of operators have made software buying decisions based off of like back-end integration functionality, like legacy POS integration, capability, as opposed to like, will this make my internet business, which I am going to be 100% an internet-only business in the future until people spend on F&B when they arrive. It's at odds with driving the consumer behavior they're seeking.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think consumers buy a certain way, and making them buy a different way because that's the technology you have in your hands is an unfortunate consequence of meaning that they subconsciously are stressed by the time they get to the end of the cart. And they're already going, oh, I wish this would just be over, or like this has been confusing, or any other number of things that happen, and that we have work to do as an industry. Okay, we're gonna flip over to what we call the lightning round.
Okay.
The intention of these is something that none of us clearly are going to be any good at, which is to be concise and give short answers. But the reality is it's never worked yet. So let's dive in and see where we go.
Maybe this time will work, right? Like it never has before, but maybe
Hope
this
springs
time will work.
eternal. Hope springs eternal. Yeah.
I feel confident that we're going to be able to do this, although I don't like the first question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Yeah. So, okay. So here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
I know how you're going to answer. So this is really hard for me to even ask, right?
And
No. I want to ask it because it's on everyone's mind. So fixed pricing or dynamic pricing?
it depends.
Does it?
I mean, I would say in this space, largely dynamic, but make sure you line your ducks up first.
Yeah. See, we're not doing a good job at lightning, but like, I don't think that most attractions have just one type. Like it's a mix of strategy.
See, this is the reason that lightning round fails. It has nothing to do with who we're interviewing. It's entirely us.
It's us.
Lightning round. So, okay. Most overrated pricing strategy in attractions.
I kind of want to say something, but I don't really want it to be on.
We can bleep it out.
I want to tell you what I'm going to say,
Yeah.
but I don't want to say it. And by the way, all of these answers depend on the attraction and the market and all that. But I think uncontrolled discounts. Those companies can do good things, and they are working hard to do them. But I think the legacies model is not good pricing.
Biggest pricing blind spot for operators.
Parity.
Groupon, necessary evil or avoidable mistake.
Leverageable if done smart.
Okay. So this is what's fascinating. As we're going through this, we're discovering more and more, there is no one size fits all.
No.
There is not like, oh, I'm going to pick from this menu of 17 things I can choose from, and this is the one that works the most often. It's literally understand your attraction, understand all these different, understand the behavior of your consumer, go through the whole process, and then you come out the other side. It almost feels like you should have a consultancy that does this, right?
Yeah. That's an awesome idea. Season passes, memberships, asset or nightmare?
Leverageable at the appropriate percentage of overall visitation.
That is okay. Do we let him get away with that answer? Because that's like you can tell what you're thinking while you're saying that, which is nightmare because most of them are done wrong and nobody does them right. So therefore, if they were done right, then yeah, maybe, but even that's hard to prove.
Well, no, I think that if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have said nightmare. I learned that for many of these attractions, especially ones that are seasonal, this is about cash and cash management. And so by selling season passes in advance, it's not only a pricing decision, it's a cash management decision. The reason I answered the way that I did is that if too much of your business starts to sit inside of season passes, then you're actually, the other end of the spectrum is like you're losing out on revenue potential.
I've always characterized memberships as loyalty.
Yeah.
And because especially in, say, a nonprofit, the members are the people that are the ones that are most likely to rally around you and to be excited about what you're doing and to give you this opportunity to actually build a brand. What I said might be really inflammatory, so I don't know, but I've always interpreted the biggest reason for memberships is loyalty. And I know there's a cash component, but it's like, this is your group, this is your people, and you're showing your loyalty. And especially in nonprofits, this is where you get all your donations and other things out of because you're building a loyalty group.
We lump them all in and there's so many different reasons to do it, right? So it couldn't be cash flow, like Evan said. It could be to get that second visit. You know, we see that in like some of the Six Flags models and things like that, where they discount the pass just to get you to come again for the per caps, right? Or it could be it's like Maury's, where their visitation is so high that the price is a ridiculous amount, right? I think there's lots of different variable with it.
But I do think
it's not a ridiculous amount per visit. It's not. But when you compare it with other things in the market, when you look at a retail pass when you look at the retail price for a season pass product to an amusement park being $450.
Yeah, but it supports your day pass pricing strategy. That's the thing is if 70% of your customer base or 80% of your customer base has bought a season pass, then there isn't any market left. You know what I mean? Like this is this like trade-off, and it's tied back to the confidence in moving day pass pricing up. Is that like if you have a, you know, the season pass, like you mentioned, a day pass is $50 and the season pass is $55, and then all of a sudden like 90% of your business is in season passes, you're essentially, I don't know, it's just not efficient given what one can do with other pricing approaches now versus when those models originally showed up.
All right. Great answer.
This is not rapid fire.
I'm getting us back on track. Okay, we're getting close, and best pricing lesson from the hotel industry.
And we're off.
I don't know how I can do this rapid. Don't drop prices last minute.
That's pithy. I like it.
And the longer version, and you can cut this, is if you like have a rate and then you have an occupancy and then last minute you drop rate, all the people who bought sooner
get mad.
Next time won't. And they had like a collective action problem around this where like booking windows compressed entirely, and all of a sudden my friend Sam Shank creates Hotel Tonight, you know, to capitalize on this thing that the industry did to itself, in addition to incredible design and good product and all that stuff, and then, you know, sold with Airbnb for however much.
I got all the best questions.
Yeah. AI and pricing. Can you trust it?
If you know how to provide it good context.
Next big pricing innovation.
I think you told me about it. I think it's the agentified shopper.
It's going to be really fascinating to see what happens with that, because I think that's going to change a lot of things. And I don't know that it's necessarily like, if you're talking about consumer confidence is like one of the biggest drivers, I don't know that it solves that at all.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the behavior. Like if I'm like, go find me the best rate on this thing for this date, then.
But that's a really one-dimensional view of pricing, because that's clearly not
that's true.
How everybody is going after it.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, well, so then maybe the true answer, the next biggest thing is prompt design.
One pricing metric every operator should track. Maybe there's more than one.
I think you said it. I think it's intent and conversion.
Yeah, intent totally. If you can get it, if you can get intent, get intent. At the trip date level, ideally with intent date associated. But the other one that everybody can create is, so I mentioned RevPAR in the hotel space. You can create that metric. Like, so RevPAR is revenue per available room. So they have a denominator that's natural at every hotel. Any operator can come up with that denominator, and it becomes useful when you start to compare dates and see how they're performing on a relative basis and saying like, what's my booked rev per available whatever? And like, it doesn't really matter what the denominator is, so long as it's constant, so that you can measure it over time. And if you look at booked revenue per available whatever, that's a good way to look at pacing for future trip dates, and you can map that to past trip dates. And yeah, you're right, Tim. It's intent. It's intent, because it's all tied to that stuff.
All right, most successful pricing tactic. This is actually said psychological, but I'm also thinking of behavioral. So just in general,
being honest with your
customers. Rolls into the next question.
My next question, which was price transparency, help or hurt?
If it's a rational strategy, it helps a lot, especially if you're starting to do something different. If there's a strategy that matches a service policy, that matches a marketing message, then your customers start to tell other customers that, hey, the reason they're doing that is they're trying to get you to buy in advance. Hey, no, you can't cancel because you got a good deal. Hey, you can't use that ticket because you bought it for a Wednesday, and that's why you got the lower price, and that it's going to be higher on a Saturday. Like, that's like a live stream of the Liftopia.com Facebook feed back circa 2018.
Well, that's the end of our lightning round. And Evan, has been fantastic. And the reason I say that is because I've come out of this interview going, now I just want to have a continued conversation because this is fascinating. And there's so much psychology behind this process. And I think most operators that I talk to go, how much is it going to make me? That's the very first question is what it's going to do to my revenue. And there's so much more to it than that on what's it going to do to your brand? What's it going to do to your overall strategy? What's it going to do to everything?
Yeah.
And how does this process work together as a testing process over a long period, maybe forever, as you continue to understand your consumer better?
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, it's been a lot of fun for me. I mean, I clearly have spent a lot of time in this space. I know the like black and white answers make for better podcasts, but hopefully I'm not too black and white because there really isn't. It depends in most of these cases. You all see a different subset of the industry than I was familiar with. So anyways, this is fun for me. I don't really have a dog in the fight these days. So it's like nice to just.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
talk.
I feel like we only covered the surface of this, right? Like we covered the behavior psychology, and I think that it is a high level. These are pretty deep topics that we got into, especially around behavioral stuff. But you probably don't have the right pricing, right? Most attractions don't have the right pricing in general.
Yeah, and buying something fancy probably isn't the next most right step.
Yeah.
But doing some basics.
And I think as operators, you can take a little risk and try this stuff on your own and just test out your gut. And there's never any growth without being a little uncomfortable. And I think as operators, we don't get uncomfortable around pricing enough with it, and we also don't allow it to play out. So I think the biggest thing whenever you're going to change your pricing or make adjustments in your pricing is give it enough time. Your customers are going to react. You're going to hear things from your employees. You're going to hear things from stakeholders. They're going to think it's not the right move to do, but you won't know if you don't give it enough time.
Totally. Yeah.
So, Evan, I'm going to say this. At some point, I think we're going to have you back on. It might be a year from now, but we're having you back on. And we're going to talk about AI and whether any of our predictions were correct and the impact.
Give us 2 weeks and it'll be a different ecosystem.
Yeah, that might also be true. Yeah.
You're listening to Signal.